Hello, welcome. This is Dania Esperanza. Esperanza means hope. Welcome to Hope Speaks. And today I am filming at the Botanical Garden in Providence. Roger Williams Park. I have my Providence t-shirt. And the reason why I'm here is because I need vitamin D. I'm really low on my vitamin D, and that's not good, but most New Englanders are. And I had to come closer to a place that my grandmother fell in love with. We used to live in New York City when we migrated from the Dominican Republic, and my father told me a really cool story about my grandmother. When she was in New York, she had a vision for our family to be in a better place in the United States. And she had a friend who her son lived in New York. So when my grandmother came to New York to visit, she connected with her friend's son, and he used to come over and conversate with my grandmother and things like that. So one day he knew that he needed to come to Rhode Island to visit a family member of his. So when he was coming to visit, he loved Rhode Island so much that he told my grandmother she should come with him for another visit. And when she came, she knew that this was where she wanted our family to come to instead of New York City, because New York, it's a city. My grandmother wanted us to own our own homes and build our businesses, so she felt like this would be a better place. And it's interesting because Roger Williams founded Providence and came into Narragansett in 1636, and he came into Providence and bought Providence and put it as the place for freedom of religion. And Quakers migrated here because they weren't accepted elsewhere, and they had just freedom to practice their religion without others, putting them down, which is pretty cool because everybody should practice their own religion, their own beliefs that they believe that they can connect with God, source. So it's a beautiful thing. And the reason why I wanted to be closer to my grandmother for this one is because I want to talk about something really sad and serious, but something that I know my grandmother would want me to talk about, especially now there's so much suicide and domestic abuse. So when I was young and graduating from high school, I was lost and broken and had a lot of sadness and past traumas from childhood wounds that were horrible. So I started dating someone for the first time, my first boyfriend, and he was a narcissist. He was an abuser. He beat me all the time, which is interesting and sad at the same time because my mom used to beat me every single day. So I kind of went from my mom beating me every day to this boyfriend of mine beating me. I ended up having to get an apartment at a young age, and he just made himself very comfortable in there. Didn't work. I didn't have a car. I didn't know how to drive. So the first car that he got, I used to have to make the car payments for him, and I couldn't even drive it. But he beat me every day for like no reason. And so many times I didn't want to have sex with him. He used to take me by force, which is rape. And that was common for him. So we had a child together, and when I was pregnant with him, I ended up visiting the hospital, and I have medical records that can prove the abuse during that time, and family and friends who used to come to my aid and pray over me so that this disturbing, very disturbing individual would stop. Finally, when our child was approximately 3 years old, I had fully broken up with him. And I was so proud of myself because it was scary being young, especially that young. I gave birth at 19, almost 20 years old. And my child was born um, pretty much a little bit premature because of all the stress that caused some issues as well. And my abuser chose to one day, after we were fully broken up and I was working on healing, he came to my apartment. And it was 10:30 at night. I was getting ready for bed. I had done laundry, so I was putting together the sheets. In my bed, I was changing the fitted sheet, and he was carrying our child because he pushed himself into the house. I told him he couldn't come in because the child was sleeping. So I didn't want him to, you know, wake. And he pushed himself through the door. So since it was late and I didn't want to have like issues with neighbors, I stayed quiet, went into my room and started putting my bed together. And while he was holding our child in his arms, he yanked the fitted sheet off of my hands. And then he went back and put the baby back in bed in the crib. And then he came into the room and he proceeded to rape me. It was horrible. I screamed. I was afraid that the baby would hear me. So I cried and screamed and I fought. I remember fighting, and I should have gone to the hospital and gotten a rape kit, but I didn't. And I thought that the horror was over until like a couple of weeks later. I started getting kind of nauseous, and 3 weeks later I realized I missed my period, and then I realized I was pregnant. So I had to get an abortion. But I wish I would have reported it. I wish I would have done something about it sooner. I kept it under, the rug, and I spoke about it to many of my friends and some of my clients. A lot of my clients know the story. Our child is aware of it, but decided to take the father's side and not believe me and label me as crazy, which is what a lot of people do when you tell them that you've been raped or you're having a domestic situation. But this wasn't a domestic because I was no longer with him. He pushed himself through the door and he proceeded to rape me. He used to hurt me and beat me all the time, and I did have hospital visits because of it. I didn't fight back because when I tried to defend myself, it made matters worse. And it was many years ago, but not that long ago, I bumped into him at the supermarket, and I just wanted to run. I never want to bump into this person again. I know that we have one child together, but I don't ever want to see him. And if I do, I will not approach him. He approached me, and I was neutral and said hello, but I walked away, and it was just uncomfortable, and it brought out some really serious wounds that I thought I had already healed. But I believe that sharing my story and speaking my truth to those who are victims, it will be helpful, because a lot of times people think that we're alone, but you're not. And so many people suffer in silence because there's a lot of flying monkeys. And flying monkeys in psychology is people who know that there's abuse happening, they're aware of it, but they excuse it with things like, oh, he didn't really mean it, he is still young, or she is, has been abused herself, or she, does this because of this or that. And I'm talking he and she in general, because there are narcissists and abusers, there are male and female abusers. So it's very painful when you know that you're being abused and you come to someone that you trust and you try to let them know that this is happening to you, and then they kind of want you to just suck it up or not say anything, and it's just so toxic, and it causes more deeper wounds to form, and this is why people feel that they have no other choice but to disappear, like commit suicide, or or murder. Like some women have gone past, past boundaries, and they have had felt like they just have to kill the person. And that's not what I would ever advise, because this can be your hell and this can be your heaven on earth. So if you kill someone, you're definitely going to go to jail. And that is going to sit in your conscience worse than anything else, especially for people who are spiritual and who are here to be meek and awaken this earth. So it's important for us to not take our lives, because we need you. There's a lot of wonderful and beautiful beings on this earth that take a lot of pain and suffer in silence, and they don't want to be here anymore because they're aware of the beauty and the understanding of heaven. And some of us feel heaven and remember heaven, and we feel as if it's not here, and that this is the world of evil forces. And even in the Bible, there's a lot of wording about how um, heaven is so amazing and so loving and so real and so great, and that we will suffer here on earth, and we will have all these demonic and horrible things happen to us, and we see evil people rise and create amazing businesses and get married and have children and live their lives, and then we know their stories behind closed doors, how they're liars, cheaters, abusers, narcissists. They don't give to the poor. They don't do anything for anybody. And then here are these meek and very humble and loving people who wish they could feel the love of God, and within others on earth, have great partnerships and relationships, and they just see egotistic people and narcissistic people triumph and get everything they want and need. And then, others don't really make it, and they struggle, and they feel like, their children die early or young, or they see people who they really love pass, and they just don't want to be here anymore. So sometimes they do crazy things. And sometimes they they die from some horrible and terrible stress because they suppress a lot of pain. They know that they're hurting, and they don't go to a doctor, they don't go to a therapist, they don't seek help, they don't really want to talk about their abuse, they don't want to talk about their pain, so they stay quiet. And that kind of thing just stays inside of you, causes sometimes cancers, brain aneurysms, and all kinds of terrible things that can happen. So I have a story about a client that she came in, she actually had an appointment with me for a service, and she had to cancel the same day because she had a situation at work. So when she finally came in, I said to her, I hope everything is okay. And she told me that her best friend died. And I was like, what? So she said that her best friend had been suffering with severe depression and stress and a lot of other things because she married a man who, I don't know if he was physically abusive, but he was mentally abusive. And he was a cheater, a narcissist, and she had several children that were adults who had depression issues and had abused drugs, and she was trying to take custody of her grandson. But this was an amazing woman who was very intelligent and a kind human being. And while she was at work, her nose started bleeding, her ears started bleeding, and it was shocking to her best friend because they worked together. So when she came in and told me she passed away, I felt terrible. And then about 2 weeks later, another one of my clients comes in and tells me the story about her best friend who lost her wonderful mother, and it was the same person. And then she described some horrible things that were happening. So I believe that if you are being abused, you need to get help, and there is hope, there is healing. You need to fill yourself up with love and stay away from the abuser. It's interesting because when you're young, especially before you turn 25, you don't have fully reasoning. Your brain is not fully developed, and that was my problem. I didn't have my reasoning developed at that age. I obviously scientifically couldn't have it, and I chose to be with someone who was like my mom, very abusive, and like my father, a narcissist. And I was drawn to him because seemed familiar to me. And sometimes familiar, you think it's safe and comfortable, and then you turn around and you realize that the familiarity comes from the root of the abusers that you was raised around and saw, because my mom beat me every day, and it was horrible, for no reason. Many times it was because I cracked a cup by mistake, or if I came a few minutes late from school because the bus ran late. Um, Things that I didn't even do, she would pretty much believe that I did something and go after me and beat me. And it was because she had so much anger and pain, she used me as her punching bag. So that was all I knew, but I was grateful to have my grandparents, because I came to the United States when I was uh, about 5 years old. And my grandmother, she used to drill a lot of beautiful messages from the Bible and told me that, I was always going to be with God and watched over by God. And I always feel it and I believe it. And that has always kept me true. But there's people who don't believe in God or don't think that He even exists, or she, or the universe, the love, the good energy. But we have it here on earth. We don't have to die to feel heaven. We can feel heaven here. But you have to be determined to move forward and live your best life. And it is possible. You have hope. You just need to find the help. This video is becoming pretty long, so I'm going to end this. But there are other very sad stories that have been haunting me lately, and I needed to get this out. So thank you for watching.